The Civil Rights Revolution had many recognizable faces.
Now the time has come for this nation to fulfill its promise.
We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
But just outside the spotlight, there were others who turned the gears of policy and law, setting the foundations for equality.
If you live in this world, you've got to have faith that eventually you're going to prevail and that eventually human rights and dignity are going to win out.
Jerome Shestack has shaped and protected human rights on a global scale, establishing just law in developing countries, bringing attention to the tens of thousands missing in South America, and the plight of dissidents in the former Soviet Empire.
I think Jerry's a naturally ethical person, and for him doing what's right seems like there's no other choice.
He is Mr. International Human Rights, and if he isn't a household name, he should be.
Why do you pursue justice? Because you never know fully whether you can achieve justice. But what you can see is injustice. And you fight injustice, then you strive towards achieving justice. Justice, justice shalt thou pursue.
The significance of that scripture was etched into Jerry's soul by his grandfather.
If you see your parents and grandparents live a life of charity, of being honest with you, of integrity, of hard work, of valuing character, those are the best lessons that you can have.
Jerry's studies took him to the University of Pennsylvania, earning a bachelor's degree in economics while concentrating on naval studies. Jerry graduated as the world went to war. He enlisted in the Navy for 3 years, serving most of that time in the South Pacific aboard the carrier USS Ticonderoga. He would survive a direct kamikaze attack, living to remember the deaths of many friends and comrades. War in itself is a defining experience. But for Jerry, a pivotal moment happened at the close of the war.
At San Francisco, the United Nations Conference on World Security Organization moves ahead.
His ship in for repairs. He happened to be in San Francisco as the world came together for the UN Charter Conference.
I wanted to get in to see it, but of course a young Lieutenant J.G., which I was then, is not going to get into a conference like that.
The young naval lieutenant was forced to sit outside the closed-door meeting. But a twist of fate sat him next to Judge Manley Hudson, head of the International Court.
We started to talk, and I told him about my dreams for a great world and what it would be like after the war was over.
Amazingly, Judge Hudson invited Jerry to become his Navy attaché for the day, giving him free access to the opening of the UN conference.
And later, when I became the U.S. ambassador to the Commission on Human Rights, I remembered what had been begun on that day in April 1945.
He entered Harvard School of Law, where he became known immediately for 2 things: his practical jokes and launching the crusade to admit women into the prestigious Ivy League program.
He was a visionary enough to know that the entry of women into the profession would change not just the institution of the practice of law itself, but the agenda of the profession.
I don't see any real distinction between women's rights and human rights. Women's rights are also human rights.
Despite the busy schedule of law school, Jerry not only found time to champion equality for women, but to pursue the love of his life.
I fell in love immediately. Let's make it a long story short. We had a blind date. I fell in love. I took her to an expensive restaurant. It took me a long time to pay for it, but I kept after her for 3 years, and I won.
And finally I paid for dinner.
Accepting an assistant professorship at LSU, he and Marcia Rose made the move to the Deep South. Civil unrest boiled just beneath the surface.
It was a shock going to a Southern University where there are separate water facilities for blacks and whites. LSU at that time did not admit black students, and I led a movement among the faculty to pass a resolution that we should admit black students. But the faculty stuck to it, and eventually, within a year, a black student was admitted. I was working hard in a law firm, building up my practice, becoming a good trial lawyer. Then the civil rights revolution broke out.
It was 1963. President John F. Kennedy formed the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law, asking Siegel and Shestack to take part. Jerry not only volunteered, he stepped up to serve as the group's first executive director.
We opened an office actually in Mississippi and sent lawyers there to handle cases. It was actually very dangerous to do that at that time.
You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
Jerry really worked with Bernie to address the problems that the Kennedys were interested in, and that was enormously important in terms of giving respectability and energy from the perspective of the legal establishment for civil rights.
He chaired the International League for Human Rights, which is the oldest NGO for human rights. He started the Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, was the head of the Committee on Conscience at the Holocaust Museum.
Handpicked by President Jimmy Carter in 1977 to serve as his human rights ambassador to the United Nations, Jerry found himself in a position to initiate and steer some of America's most important international human rights policies.
It was hard work to try to persuade people that it was in the national interest to put human rights front and center. Very, very hard to do.
15,000 people disappeared in Argentina, a large number in Chile, a large number in Brazil, and the UN was doing nothing.
Military junta kidnapped, tortured, and killed so-called subversives in order to silence opposition of the government.
Son nuestra última esperanza. Por favor, ayúdennos. Ayúdennos, por favor.
At the 1980 UN Commission session, Jerry advocated a resolution to establish an effective working group on disappearances.
His bringing it to the attention of the UN Human Rights Commission attracted the antipathy of Argentina and other countries, and they complained all the way to the State Department, and he had to explain himself to the highest levels of government.
Jerry's dedication and vision triggered change that helped the American Bar Association shed its stodgy reputation as an old boys network.
Working together in the ABA when efforts were first being made to take the ABA out of the 19th or maybe the 18th century and make it a modern organization, specifically that was interested in civil rights and civil liberties. And Jerry played a very leading role in that activity.
And when he would bring these things to our House of Delegates, the answer would be, it's not germane. Well, Jerry didn't take his ball and go home. Instead, what Jerry did is he changed the ABA.
In 1997, appreciation for those changes was recognized when Jerry was elected president of the American Bar Association. August 2006, Jerry was honored with the ABA's top award.
Please join me in welcoming once again to the well of this house to receive the ABA medal, Jerome J. Shestack.
There's a wonderful story. E.B. White said that he gets up each morning and he says, is this the morning when I'm going to make the world better or the morning when I'm going to enjoy the world? And I think Jerry does both.
Someone once said that you grow old when your dreams become regrets and when your hopes become resignation. We still have a dream of a just world and a hope that it will come to pass. Each age is a new age and one with new opportunity. And if you don't remain optimistic and hopeful and work for those ends, you might as well not have lived.